Greetings, Mark Rang here, publisher of the Conway Daily Sun, and today my guests are Sara Butterfield, who's the executive director of the Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition, and Josh Brustin, who's her sidekick. I guess you're on the board, right?
I am on the board.
Right.
Board chair, in fact.
Board chair. Okay, well, we have the committee. So we're here to talk about your next charrette, which is May 6th at Ledge Brewing Company. All right, so, and then, just so I think I understand this, the charrette, this is going to be for the public on May 6th, all right? And
Correct.
then you guys kind of go sequester to yourself, come up with a plan, work with designers and engineers, and then there'll be a reveal on May 12th.
Interview over. I think we're good.
Okay. So what, well, why don't we start with, like, what is a charrette? And, well, let's talk about where is it? I mean, what's the property we're talking about?
Sure. So we're looking at a property in North Conway this year. It's actually two properties right next to north of Memorial Hospital. So it's two adjacent parcels making up about 12 acres.
Okay, and those parcels, that used to be the old bypass property?
One of them, and then the other is New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority property.
So they're technically both bypass properties, and then one of them at the end of Remote Trail, which is a private road, that was acquired by New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, and the other property is still owned by the Department of Transport, the DOT.
Okay.
So we're looking at both.
Okay, so when you're looking at them, I mean, just so to get the who owns what out of the way the bypass property works, they first offer it to the town, right? So have you got indications that the town is not interested in it?
So the process for these properties, we'll start with Remote Trail. The Remote Trail property was offered to the town declined. New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority actually decided to purchase it. They kind of have a second right of refusal, and they made that purchase. The other DOT property directly next to the hospital offered to the town passed. Then New Hampshire Housing gets a shot at it. They passed. Then it goes back to the town. They passed, and then it goes on the open market. And so that's the process for that one. And my understanding is that New Hampshire Housing, they had a number of options with the bypass properties, and they opted to purchase the property at Settlers Green. Those
Okay, but they still own one of the properties.
They do, and that is actually on the open market, and is now my understanding is it's under agreement.
Okay, so if it's under agreement by somebody, and not you folks, obviously.
No.
So what their goal was, New Hampshire Housing's goal is to create affordable rental housing. And so they purchased the property, they seek out developers to develop the property. If that just doesn't happen, then they then go ahead and put it in the open market.
But
And
it's
that's
under
what they've
agreement
done.
now, though.
And it's now under agreement. And I'm not sure what's going to be built there.
Okay, so that means if it's under agreement, that means you're left with the other one piece of property.
We're not selling either, so we can still use both for the charrette,
Yeah.
for the purposes of this charrette.
Okay.
Yeah, the Housing Coalition doesn't purchase or develop property, so that was never the intention with doing the charrette there. It's mostly a piece of property that will allow us to examine what's possible in our town, and it's just an available property that we can look at.
So does that, by you doing the charrette and doing all that, I mean, obviously the people who are involved, HEB and a bunch of other technical folks, that would help a developer, right? Is that how, I mean, is that part of that? I mean, you're basically outlining a possible plan for that piece of property.
It could. I hope if we are able to show that affordable housing is possible on the property, I hope it would be an asset to a possible developer.
Yeah, so this is unusual in that there are two properties. We normally look at one property. These two properties happen to be abutting. So we're going to look at, if you combined both of those, what could you do? But then we're also going to look at them separately. And what's kind of interesting about this one is that the Remote Trail property is a residential use property. The larger parcel next to the hospital is commercial. And because of that, different zoning ordinances apply. So we can take a look at both of those, apply the zoning ordinances for residential to the Remote Trail property, the commercial zoning ordinances that are affordable housing friendly to the commercial property, and show what can be done on each. It's an interesting comparison.
Is it, I mean, in terms of housing though, does it make any difference whether you're in a commercial or a residential zone?
It does. Different things are allowable based on which zone you're building on.
But you can, I mean, it seems like whatever is, let me ask it this way, whatever is allowed in a residential zone is certainly allowed in a commercial zone, right?
And then some.
And greater
then some.
density
So it's
in
right.
commercial.
So it's actually an advantage to be in the commercial side.
It's an advantage to be in the commercial side for a couple of reasons. One, that there's more density by being commercial, and then also you've got the commercial frontage. So there's a potential, especially a lot this size, there's a potential to do quite a bit of building, residential building, but then for a developer, there's an opportunity to possibly have a little bit of mixed-use commercial as well to help offset their expenses.
So Sarah, so you have the first public meeting, and then the meeting with the professionals, and then you have the reveal.
Yeah.
So what's the purpose of the first meeting? I mean, is it just for people like me to show up and say, I'm like, what's the purpose of it?
Sure. So just to take a step back, a charrette is a collaborative process where a group of design professionals get together with the community and create a vision of what could happen on a piece of property based on what's currently allowed with zoning, what's available for infrastructure, and other factors. So in the process, we do a public listening session first where the community comes in and helps kind of talk about what we want as a group for our community, what we'd like to see, whether we think that we'd like to see more of a village area with mixed commercial and residential, or whether we want to see more single family homes or apartment style housing. The community gets to come in and talk about what their wants or hopes are for the area. And then the design team, which is made up of architects, engineers, landscape architects, real estate professionals, bankers, a whole group of folks come together for a collaborative 8-hour day of design, and they put together what could be possible on that property based on.
And this is all done volunteer, right?
Correct.
I mean, all the professionals.
Yep. They're all local people who care about our community and are volunteering their time. It's really awesome. So they get together and put that public input in with what's allowed with zoning, and they come up with a hypothetical project. And then at the public reveal, we talk about what we were able to create and what maybe the opportunities are to do more changes that could be made, and it's just another opportunity for the community to be involved in the conversation at that point. This is just a hypothetical design. It's not a real development, so it's just a time for the community to come and be part of the conversation for how we want to shape our town.
So you did have, I think it was last year, you had the charrette for the county property, right?
Right.
So a lot of time and energy goes into it. What became of that?
So what happens is we kind of create a shared understanding. It's an opportunity for us to educate the community, advocate, and come together about what a vision for what we see our future of the community to be. So it was a really interesting process for me. I think that there was a visible shift in perception over the course of the project, which we did 3 days on that one because it was for the whole county. We did multiple listening sessions. And just seeing people come in with one idea about what the area needs for housing, and then hearing the statistics from us, the personal stories from business owners who can't hire and adequately staff their businesses, the personal stories from people who have family members who are dealing with the lack of affordable housing, whether it's, homelessness or just the lack of affordability. And I think that people left with a very different perception of the situation than what they came with.
Yeah, the county property was an unusual one because there were many towns involved, but the property was in Ossipee. And so the infrastructure that would have to come to the property, fire department, things like that, a lot of people had questions about how is this going to operate.
Right.
And so it was very well attended. And I think that was fantastic because it really, like you said, it really brought to light problems that I think a lot of people didn't know were out there,
right,
especially with homelessness. And so I think a lot of people were educated throughout this process in a way that we don't normally see in a charrette.
Right.
By the end of it, what ended up being challenging is that we couldn't provide the community with what they were looking for. One, they had very specific wants for this county property because there's a lot of farmland there. They're very protective of that property. But the biggest thing it didn't have was an adequate infrastructure.
Right.
It didn't have water and sewer.
Didn't have water and
there's
sewer.
only so much we could do.
Right.
Right.
So it turned, well, without water and sewer, and we can talk about how water and sewer is available for this property by the hospital, but so the number I have is that you came up with like an average unit would be like $322,000 for the county, which was that for a house or for a apartment, or what was the, or what?
We did a couple of different options. We did kind of standalone, single family homes. We did some duplex options, but yeah, the lower end of that was about $320,000.
Which ain't affordable.
Well, that's an interesting comment because, well, we did talk about this. There's a difference, I think, and it's a confusing thing to talk about when you talk about housing. There's two kind of different terms that we use for affordable. There's affordable, which is what is considered affordable for our community is 80% of the area median income. That kind of wage earner would be able to afford that property, paying no more than 30% of their total income towards their housing costs. So that is one way to think about affordability. And then there's also just what is affordable to you or me, and those numbers are going to be different. It's 30% of whatever I make, or 30% of whatever you make, or 30% of whatever a teacher or a nurse or an electrician makes. So that $320,000 home, while it might not have been affordable to everyone, it would have been affordable to a household making about $100,000, which if you have two wage earners making about $50,000, which is our median wage in Carroll County, it was affordable to a group of people. Unfortunately, it wouldn't have been affordable to everyone, but there are people in our community that we really need to live and work here that would have been able to afford that price tag.
So, I mean, Josh, what's the average cost of a home?
I just looked today, and in Conway, we are still right around 500,000, 494,000.
Okay, so
that's
that's
a median sale price in Conway year to date.
Okay, and that includes a lot of second homes, obviously.
It does.
Yeah, so it's up there. So
it does.
$500,000 is certainly at the top end of what most people can afford, locals, for sure. Right.
Yes, significantly more than most locals can afford.
So now going back to the North Colony property, that's on town water, town sewer.
Right.
So what would be I mean, just in general, would that be apartment complex? Would that be the best? I mean, it seems like that would be the highest density use.
That's the highest density. What we have currently is we're actually doing okay with apartment-style rental housing, the Avesta-style housing. But that only serves one segment of the need that we have. So what we don't have, and what's very challenging, is creating homes, maybe even duplexes, triplexes, that can accommodate a family, for example, 3 or 4 people, that have a little yard. We don't have any of that. And so the hope, I think, with this property is that we have a number of different types of properties on this property that can accommodate anybody from somebody looking for a rental, for somebody that's looking for an entry-level purchase, to some market rate homes. What's really important is to remember is that we're trying to get some of this stuff built. Right. And so how do you do that? And I think the planning board is doing a great job of chipping away at what it's going to take to actually bring a developer in who's going to build these things. Not an Avesta, that's a nonprofit that's building apartment style, but a developer who can build homes at an affordable price. And sometimes in doing this, you're not going to solve the entire problem in one shot. But if you build $300,000 homes, there are plenty of people in our area. If you look at the gap between 3 and 5, there are plenty of people who would be happy to purchase a $300,000 home that couldn't currently do it. And if we create those and they buy those, that maybe opens up other properties in the area. So maybe we take a renter now and they become an owner, and now we can fill another rental spot. And what's happened is, surrounded by national forest, we've had no growth. And so we're very insulated. And so you don't create this natural, this housing kind of transition from rental to the cycle of housing. We don't have that here. And so we're trying to create that. And it's been very challenging to do. And the planning board is working very hard and creatively to create zoning ordinances that aren't too restrictive. And what they're also doing, which I think is great, is and this was evidenced in the most recent warrant, is that they're trying to take some of the red tape out of it, so that a developer doesn't come in and say, I'm not even thinking about going through Conway, because you have to go through this step, this step, this step, without even knowing if it's even going to be feasible. They're just going somewhere else. And our current planning board, our current planner, I think, understands that and are trying to get rid of some of that red tape.
So, Sarah, what is the overall charge of the coalition? I mean, it's not subsidized housing, right?
No.
I mean, that's what Investa does. That's subsidized housing, right? Isn't it? I mean, there's some of those units are subsidized, or they have to offer a certain level, a certain rental income.
Well, they're built in. Well, go ahead. You know the answer to that.
Right. Well, yes,
better than I
we
do.
have a very different mission than Avesta. We are a 501c3 nonprofit advocacy organization, so we don't actually develop or manage housing at all. We just work within the community to educate and advocate for an adequate supply of for sale and for rent housing in our community.
Okay, so you've mentioned that it stretches from what's affordable to you and I, and affordable to the average person on Conway and all that. And how do the other housing projects? I mean, this house is being built. I mean, you see them around. Obviously, single-family homes are expensive, I'm sure. But then you have the big projects. You got Ridgeline. They have the 17 rental units, and they're building some expensive. They're pretty expensive, over 55. And then you have Barsamian with his couple hundred in back of the TJ Maxx. Is that going on? Have you heard? I know he's approved for that.
It's a slow process, and I haven't seen him go through planning in a while, so I'm not sure the pace that he has.
But is it true? I guess where I'm going with that is it must be true that no matter what you add, helps, right? So someone may buy an expensive house, but they may free up a house they moved out of that isn't as expensive.
That's essentially our position, is that we need more housing at all levels in our community.
All right. So in a perfect world, what is? Well, you don't know. You're gonna have the reveal. You haven't designed it yet, but what would be the perfect setup for the North Conway property? The commercial in front and maybe some housing in the back, or a mix?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the goal is to actually make it feasible. So we're not only looking at the property for what we can put on there based on what the zoning allows, but that's when we bring in lenders. We're actually putting numbers to it. So we actually and we kind of do a pro forma based on what we think it would cost to build this. And at the end of the day, not only do we have something on paper that shows what can go there, but whether or not, based on how we divvied it up through the different zoning ordinances, what it would cost for a developer to build in there, and they can actually make their profit.
Okay, so for the May 6th one, Sarah, which is the public, I mean, obviously you're going to say the things you're saying here today, but you're really looking for people to go there to learn about what the project is or to give you input?
A little bit of both. So we're going to do a little presentation at the beginning to create some shared understanding, go over some statistics about what the costs are for rent for sale, the vacancy rate in our area, median wage. So we kind of come to a shared understanding, and then we're going to take public comment and hear about what people want who live in the community. And then we'll incorporate that into the design. So it'll be May 6th at Ledge Brewing in Intervale. 5:30, and then we'll do our full design day the next day on the 7th, and that one is not open to the public. It's just going to be the design team, and then we'll all reconvene on the 12th at 5:30 back at Ledge to do the reveal.
The process on design day, and this is my third one now, and it's just such a
I mean,
fun.
design day is which day?
Design day is the day we spend 8 hours
The
actually
reveal.
making
I
this
mean,
happen.
not the reveal.
We actually do the work.
The professionals.
Put it on paper.
Yeah.
And that's a day where I don't do much. I just sit back and watch these guys and women do their thing. And it's incredible what they can do in an 8-hour period. The landscape architects come in, and what I think the public will see is not only what can go onto a property, but actually how it can look like a real neighborhood. And there's so many creative things that can be done these days to make a small house look bigger, or that actually not that, but can make one of these developments really fit into the landscape of the community. So it's also great for people who are a little skeptical and a little worried about change, and maybe a little bit worried about a different type of property being built. It's really interesting to see how creative people have gotten out there in the world and how you apply it to Conway, and it opens some minds, I think, at the end of the day. At least that's the hope.
Yeah.
And it's a really good opportunity too to talk about the zoning updates that have happened and what might be coming along down the line, because we will be doing additional zoning updates for the next couple of years, and just better understanding what they really mean. You can walk into the voting booth and it says something, and it's really hard to understand sometimes, and it's hard for the people in our community to know exactly what can be done here. And this is a good way to talk about that as well.
Because when people vote, the warrant was huge this year, and I think John Eastman, the town manager, was saying that with a article that's recommended by the planning board and the selectmen, not one has ever been defeated. Like, it's unanimous, like check, 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 right? Before we went on the air, Sarah and I were chatting, and I mentioned that a friend of mine is building an ADU on his property for his daughter, and he happens to have a son-in-law who's an architect, but it's like the 600-foot, probably going to be a very cool-looking building, but detached. And that wasn't possible before, correct? in the town of Conway?
It has been possible to do an ADU previously, but it was by exception, is my understanding.
That's right.
So in this recent town warrant, they've made that easier for people to do on their own properties.
So have you heard, either of you, have you heard people doing this since the, I mean, it's only, we only passed it a couple months ago, or beginning of the month actually, but have you heard any interest in doing these things outside of my friend who just kind of volunteered that?
I hadn't, and anecdotally, I believe that my understanding is that there hadn't really been a lot of uptake in doing ADUs locally, and that's part of why they made that recent change on this warrant. Was it was a little too difficult and a little too expensive in order to do it the way that it was set up. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and ADUs are becoming somewhat ubiquitous, and so now lending has caught up to it. So now you can actually get financing on an ADU where you couldn't before. They're very expensive to build. It's expensive to build anything these days. So now you can go to a bank and say, I'm building an ADU on my property. They'll actually lend on that now. So you can carry that over a number of years, which is very different. This project is interesting with ADUs in that if you incorporate the ADU on the front end, it's much less expensive than building a detached ADU down the road. So if we factor that into the build, it will end up being less expensive just by that. And with ADUs, what's also kind of cool is that you may end up building 40, 50 homes in there, but you can add 40, 50 ADUs without having to go through planning. And so that essentially doubles the density. And then the last thing with ADUs that I think is important is $300,000 may not be affordable for everybody, but if you have a $300,000 home with an ADU, lenders will also allow you to use the income from that ADU to go towards your debt to income ratio. So you may actually qualify now. Before you were at 300,000, you may now qualify for 375 or 400,000. So that changes the numbers.
So when you're building a primary home, I think this is one of the things you're referencing is that I know with my friend, he's got an existing home. He's putting a little ADU in his backyard, but he has to also put in a new septic system. Basically, he's building a single family home, another one on his property. But if you do it when you build the original home, then you can have a combined septic system, I assume, and those kind of infrastructure things.
It's by number of total bedrooms.
Yeah.
So it depends how you divvy it up.
So even if you didn't build the ADU right off the bat, you could plumb for it. You could design a septic system to accommodate it. Hey, okay, so I guess we got 5 minutes left. Is there anything else? Anything else? If not, I just want to ask Josh about the real estate market.
Sure.
If I can. So and Josh, you're owner of Pinkham Real Estate, so you have your ears to the ground all the time about real estate. Has anything changed? Is it just as tight?
We have no idea what's going on actually at my office. No, we meet every week and we have strategy meetings every week, and we take a very close look at what's happening with the market so that we can communicate with our clients, both buyer clients and seller clients, trends. And what I think we're seeing in the current climate in the world right now, what we're seeing is that people who are buying high-end homes and they have money, they still have money and they're still buying high-end homes.
Cash
and generally speaking.
Yeah.
Some financing, but it's very easy for them to do that. They're not intimidated by the interest rates. The entry-level buyer is wanting to get into something. They're still getting into whatever they can that's considered entry level. It's that middle range which is wild, but the middle range here is like $600,000 now, and which is so bizarre that it's that much. But that's the level that we're seeing. That's leveling off a little bit, maybe slowing down a little bit. Those are the buyers who are impacted by their 401ks. Keep an eye on that. They're impacted by the markets and interest rates, and they're also a little more worried about job security. And so that's a segment of the market that seems to be slowing down just a little bit.
I mean, nationally, another friend of mine moved from Bartlett pre-COVID, right? So he sold his house just before we had the big appreciation. He moved to Wisconsin, and he just moved back. So the house he bought in Wisconsin, in rural Wisconsin, was like $139,000, and he sold it for like $142,000. Like, not much appreciation. So he comes back. He missed that window. I mean, how much is North Conway representative of the whole country? I mean, because you read now, like, Florida's flooded with homes. I mean,
it's just not the same. And I think we've just always, even during the recession back in 2009, we were just never as impacted by that. And again, it's supply and demand. We just don't have a lot of supply here. We haven't had a lot of growth. We haven't had any sprawl. And so there's always that second home demand that is going to buy up here based on where we're at and how wonderful a place it is. So we haven't been as impacted as some of those other areas. we're starting to see quite a bit of inventory come on now on the market, but not in any way that's alarming. It's a healthy amount of inventory that's coming. We've needed it for a long time. Hopefully that will allow things to soften just a little bit price-wise.
Okay. Did we, Rob, did you put up the poster? Okay, Sarah, you can talk us out.
Great.
Promo the event.
Yeah, I'd encourage everybody to come out to both of those public days of the event, the 6th and the 12th. And I just want to give a thank you to all of our supporters. As I mentioned, we are a nonprofit organization and we're primarily funded through membership support. And so just thank you to everybody who contributes to our work all year round. And then in particular, thank you to the sponsors for this event. We were assisted by the White Mountain Board of Realtors in achieving a grant that has been extremely helpful for putting this on, as well as grant funding from New Hampshire Housing, and then amazing sponsorship funding from our Vail Resorts, Attitash and Wildcat, Pinkham Real Estate, and Sane Real Estate, all awesome sponsors of our resort. So
you got a chance to get those credits in. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay.